1 to 2 million wild animals are trafficked illegally annually.
Find that about 70% of the new infections we are confronted with are zoonotic.
Only 5% of the poachers on a court of law get sentenced due to a lack of forensic evidence.
About 40–50% of people with Ebola who end up in hospital die.
Up to 3 rhinos are shot every day. In fact, a really sad story is this rhino behind me that was one of 4 animals that were shot in one night.
Wildlife crime is the illegal killing of animals, of wildlife. Wildlife crime consists of wildlife poaching, wildlife trafficking, and wildlife trade.
So wildlife crime is committing something that is against the law involving wildlife. For instance, it is the taking of an animal out of the wild and putting it in a market or trading it in some way. So it is the legal taking. It can even be possession, and it can be of a whole object, like a whole animal, for example, or it can be a part of an animal. And it's such as a horn or a scale or something in that manner.
Poverty is one of the reasons that people kill animals, but as well greed, obviously. And traditional medicine is a very important reason of wildlife crime and wildlife poaching.
The biggest challenges in combating wildlife crime is that often they occur in areas where there is not adequate policing and law enforcement. So they go unnoticed and undocumented and inefficiently or incorrectly documented. Another strong challenge is that wildlife has the same priority as crimes that involve humans. So they get poor sentencing or possibly thrown out of court. A third problem is that wildlife law enforcement around wildlife crimes is obviously poorly funded, and so the testing, investigation is not to the same level as a crime with regards to humans. And fourthly, wildlife crimes are attractive to international crime organizations because they are seen as low risk and possibly a high reward. An animal product can be taken from an animal and easily trafficked. Often it is unnoticed because border security organizations are focusing on crimes that are linked to humans, for example, drug trafficking and not wildlife trafficking, so it goes unnoticed. And something that they can do is trade a wildlife product for a product that can then be marketed to humans, for example, a drug. And so wildlife crimes are linked to other sorts of organized crime and is seen as an attractive way to build up funds for those organizations. But law enforcement organizations focus on the crimes that are involving humans and not so much the wildlife. And so they miss that part of the investigation. So a wildlife product that's moved has the potential to have a disease with it that can then be transmitted to another place. Particularly if it's an illegal activity, often the correct phytosanitary measures are not done. So meat is not disinfected, for example, or a plant travels with some other disease. And this has the potential to cause the moving of a zoonotic disease. For instance, tuberculosis has been known to be being moved with animals that are transported illegally. We think COVID most likely was traveled with wildlife products that were then mixed together, different wild animals mixed together in a market, highly stressed, and resulting in a virus adapting or changing and becoming pathogenic and spreading. So our issue with illegal traffic is that it is in essence unregulated, with the result that it's it's not according to correct measures, and then we have a huge risk of spreading a disease anywhere around the world.
So zoonoses are mainly diseases coming from the animal kingdom, so to say. I mean, it's like bacteria or viruses which animals carry with them and which spill over to humans and cause disease. Trafficking of wildlife animals who've been poached really is along other trade routes, so that's one. And I think that if you look at zoonoses as such, that the majority of the zoonoses occur because humans enter the animal space, so to say. I mean, a lot of these zoonoses occur in areas where there is people using more space, deforestation, or whatever, coming in closer contact with animals than before. And I think poaching, wildlife crime, is essentially the same. You go into an area where animals live, where humans normally don't live, and you come in contact with these animals. So there is, from that interaction, a potential for spread of diseases from animals to humans, but also the other way around. I mean, TB is not only a disease from humans, but is also a disease from animals. And we know also from some occurrences that TB within the lion populations in Africa have occurred from human TB being transmitted to them as well. So it works both ways.
And it all has to do with behavior. How do we come into contact, directly or indirectly, with animal? How do we treat animal? It has to do with wildlife crime itself. It has to do with globalization. It has to do with urbanization, what we call small area. So the impact of the introduction of new infection is greater in our modern time than, let's say, 50 or 100 years ago. If people travel to the rainforest and they go deeply in the rainforest, well, that is beautiful, of course, but there's also a risk for transmission of infections.
Yeah, so I think that's coming back then to what we discussed earlier, is that if humans stay away from animals, then there would be no zoonotic diseases. But of course you need animals, or we need, as humans, we need animals for our food, for the meat. But also, if you look at wildlife poaching, I mean, if you could prevent wildlife poaching as much as possible, you also prevent the spread of these new potential zoonotic diseases from wildlife. So I think it's all about preventing humans from interacting with animals intensely. And as I said before, it's not only here in game parks or whatever in the wild in South Africa or Southern Africa. It's also in the Netherlands, where we have these mega stalls with poultry and pigs and whatever, which poses a risk for zoonotic diseases. So prevent interaction between humans and animals as much as possible is perhaps the best intervention you could think of, but perhaps also the most difficult one to get to.
Yeah, I think COVID-19 has been a good example in this respect, because there was the question, COVID is a coronavirus. We know coronavirus, they give a common cold, but sometimes there's a strain like COVID. That's not a common cold, that's a serious infections with pneumonia. People get sick and even die. You know from coronavirus that they are zoonotic, and it is in COVID-19. There has been done specific research, and that led to the wet markets.
If you look at where COVID-19 originated, at big, huge wet markets in China, where a lot of animals and also illegal animals are traded, and bringing these animals from the bush, so to say, to markets where a lot of people interact with these animals, is of course a very, we know now, very high potential risk for the new diseases being transmitted, new viruses being transmitted from these animals to humans. Yeah, I think that the advantage of having a pandemic with COVID-19 is that many people everywhere around the world know something about viruses and the spread of viruses and the measures you can take. I mean, people should go and visit these parks and go to see Big Five or whatever if they have a chance to do that. but at the same time should be informed that poaching is again a very risky thing to do because of what we've seen with COVID-19 and new diseases occurring. But building on general knowledge which people now have nowadays about viruses, that should not be too difficult, I think.
The risk of zoonotic diseases being spread by a wildlife crime can be reduced by utilizing forensics and also good surveillance tools. For example, if we can improve the forensics that occur on a wildlife crime scene, we can create improved investigations and better prosecutions, or a harsher prosecution that will result in a deterrence to wildlife crime, which means that it will be less likely to transmit zoonotic diseases by a wildlife crime. What would be really valuable with veterinarians is if they can actually pick up disease, they can also correctly document wildlife crimes, and that documentation can then end up in the courtroom where it can be used to improve prosecutions.
In wildlife forensics, we apply the same forensic techniques as in human crime scenes. If you bring someone to court, a witness statement is very, very important. But the witness statement is only important if you can objectify it with objectifiable forensic evidence like fingerprints, DNA, or the data in a mobile phone.
So witness statements greatly affect the outcome of a case as they help establish the facts and the credibility of a case. So there's different types of witness statements. So you can get police officers, you get victims even, but also medical professionals or forensic experts that will talk about their expertise of the crime scene, of the case, take it to court and tell them what they have seen and what they have witnessed on the crime scene, and that will serve as their witness statement. And that will greatly affect the outcome of the case.
Obviously, one of the important reasons that wildlife poaching occurs is that people don't get sentenced. With the Wildlife Forensic Academy, we want to provide training for rangers, veterinarians, prosecutors and police officers. The thing is actually illiteracy. More than 70% of people in the whole of Africa have a low understanding of reading and writing. So how can we train these people? That's why we have developed the idea of the Wildlife Forensic Academy. It's an experience laboratory. We can train people without books. The rangers are the first responders to enter a crime scene. If they see a crime scene, they have to protect the scene. And if they have the mandate, they can detect and collect the forensic traces and apprehend to the police. By doing this, you make the case very strong and objectifiable in a court of law. So this is one of the principles of a forensic investigation. If you enter a crime scene and you find a foot trace like this, the trace on its own has no value. It gets value if you can find the identity behind the trace. Then you start an investigation and you create a scenario. A scenario could be that you go in a car, you examine a car, you find a laptop. In the laptop, you find an address. You go to the address, you go into the house. In the house, you do an examine and you find a shoe. And the shoe fits perfectly on the trace. Then you know that someone who is involved on this crime scene has a connection with the house.
If you look at the goals this academy has set, then on the one hand it's securing these crime scenes so that these poachers end up in jail more often than now, but also making sure that the rangers and others who have to secure this crime scene when there is a wildlife crime occurring, that they are also well protected from getting all kinds of viruses or bacteria or even TB from lions, for instance, themselves.
Yeah, of course, this initiative is a starting point. It's a unique setting. It started as a forensic institute. Now we bring infectious disease in it, we bring students. I think the impact will grow over the years because I think many seeds are planted in different people who will continue to take this with them into their career to make a change. And I think for the future it's very important. It's not only I who think that, but there's a term, it's called One Health approach. And that means if you really want to come to solutions, you have to take and to choose for a multidisciplinary approach. And that's the same what we do in the masterclass. So you are going to exchange knowledge, ideas, to come to solutions. I think that really is the future.
We need specialized judges and prosecutors, we need specialized lawyers, we need custom officials that know what to look for. We need people that can determine what kind of species they have in front of them. So yeah, there's actually a lot of things that countries have to improve on. And you know, with the trade comes the spread of zoonotic diseases. So if countries have their laws in order and their law enforcement as well, it will definitely help stop the spread of zoonotic diseases too.
Wildlife crime is not an African problem, it's a world problem. Wildlife crime is directly connected to serious organized crime, terrorism, and zoonotic diseases, even with economic disruption. So your input, your connection, your participation is very, very pleased.